Chosen one, listen carefully. There is a reason people look at you and then go quiet. There is a reason conversations die when you enter a room. There is a reason eyes follow you, but mouths stay closed. This is not imagination. This is not social anxiety. This is not coincidence. You are triggering something ancient in them. And before you dismiss this message, understand this. People do not stare at what is ordinary. They stare at what disturbs their inner world. Stay with me, because by the end of this message, you will understand why silence follows you, and why your presence carries the same spiritual weight that surrounded the prophets of old. Do not skip this. This is not comfort. This is confirmation. Chosen one, you have spent too long questioning yourself. You wondered, did I do something wrong? Am I too quiet? Am I intimidating without meaning to be? Why do people look at me like that and then say nothing? Here is the truth that frees you. Silence is not rejection when it comes from recognition. People go quiet around you because their spirit notices you before their mind does. They don't know what they're sensing. They only know something shifted. Your presence interrupts the emotional autopilot they live in. Most people survive by noise, talking to avoid feeling, joking to avoid truth, filling space so silence doesn't expose them. And then you arrive, grounded, observant, unafraid of stillness. And suddenly, their usual mask feels unsafe. So they stop talking. Chosen one, prophets were never loud people. They were aware people. They noticed what others avoided. They sensed what others ignored. They saw beneath words, beneath smiles, beneath behavior. And here is the part few understand. Prophets didn't need to accuse anyone. Their presence alone exposed truth. That same awareness lives in you. You see patterns quickly. You feel motives before they're revealed. You hear what people mean, not just what they say. And people sense that. They feel that. You cannot be easily deceived. You cannot be easily manipulated. You cannot be casually lied to. So they pause. They weigh their words. They choose silence instead of exposure. Chosen one, eyes linger when the soul is trying to understand something the mind cannot categorize. They stare because you don't perform for approval. You don't leak insecurity into the room. You don't chase attention. You are not loud enough to dismiss. Not weak enough to overlook. Not familiar enough to control. That makes people uncomfortable, because most people are used to predicting others. They can't predict you, so they study you, silently. Here is a truth that may sting, but it heals. Your presence reminds people of who they used to be, not who they are now, but who they abandoned. Their old faith, their integrity, their sincerity, their courage. You don't remind them with words. You remind them with consistency. You didn't sell out. You didn't harden. You didn't numb yourself. And that contrast creates inner conflict. So they go quiet, because speaking would require honesty. Chosen one, God trained you in silence because noise would have corrupted your gift. If you had been surrounded by validation, you would have learned ego. If you had been constantly praised, you would have learned dependence. Instead, God taught you restraint, observation, patience, discernment. You learned when to speak, and when silence speaks louder. That is prophetic maturity. Chosen one, this is important. Stop apologizing for your calm. Stop explaining your quiet. Stop performing friendliness to ease others' discomfort. You are not cold. You are clear. You are not intimidating. You are anchored. And anchoring unsettles people who live emotionally untethered. You do not need to soften what God refined. Authority does not argue. Authority does not chase. Authority does not overshare. Authority stands. That is why people measure their words around you. Careless speech stops in your presence. Gossip feels uncomfortable near you. They feel watched, not by you, but by their own conscience. And conscience always quiets the mouth. N1. God did not design you for easy access. Some people stay silent because they sense. You see too much, you hear too deeply, you don't forget energy. Silence becomes their boundary. And that boundary protects you. Not everyone who notices you is meant to approach you. Observation without access is divine filtering. Now hear this carefully. This season of being stared at but not engaged is temporary. Soon, silence will turn into respect. Observation will turn into inquiry. Hesitation will turn into honor. Not because you changed, but because your fruit became visible. God protects chosen ones from premature exposure. When the time comes, words will follow. Chosen one, people stare at you because your spirit speaks before your mouth ever opens. You carry awareness. You carry restraint. You carry truth without noise. That is prophetic. Do not fear the silence. Do not rush to fill it. Do not question yourself. Stand. If this message spoke directly to your spirit, like this video, agreement activates alignment. Subscribe. What's coming next will deepen this understanding. Comment 444 if you accept your calling without shrinking. And remember, you are not being watched because you are strange. You are being watched because you are rare. Silence follows truth, and truth has found you. Chosen one, now we go deeper, because the staring is not surface level, and the silence is not social. It is spiritual. When you enter a room, something unseen shifts before anyone has time to think. Energy reorganizes. Emotional noise pauses. People become aware without knowing why. This is not because you demand attention. It is because your presence carries weight. And weight always changes atmosphere. Most people carry emotional residue when they walk into spaces. Insecurity, unhealed trauma, hidden motives, fear masked as confidence. They leak it unconsciously. You don't. That alone makes you different. You walk in contained, centered, watching more than performing, listening more than proving. And that creates tension in people who survive by projection. They feel exposed without being accused. So they stare. And they stay quiet. Because your presence interrupts their autopilot. You must understand this clearly so you stop internalizing reactions that were never meant to be carried by you. People are not staring because you are judging them. They are staring because their own awareness increases around you. They become more self-conscious, more aware of what they say, more aware of what they hide. And when people don't feel safe hiding, they choose silence. This is not rejection. This is instinct. Chosen one, there is something else happening that few talk about. Your nervous system is regulated. You don't react quickly. You don't chase emotional highs. You don't panic in silence. That stability is rare. And rare things disrupt familiar environments. Most people live in emotional chaos without realizing it. They think anxiety is normal. They think overstimulation is personality. They think noise equals connection. Then they encounter you. And suddenly their inner imbalance becomes louder. Not because you caused it, but because contrast reveals what was already there. So they stare, because they are trying to locate the source of their discomfort. And it isn't you. It's themselves. Chosen one, this is why confident people sometimes grow quiet around you. Have you noticed that? People who talk a lot suddenly slow down. People who dominate conversations start listening. People who usually perform become measured. That is not intimidation. That is authority without aggression. You don't compete for space. You occupy it. And authority always causes people to recalibrate. There is another layer you must understand. You carry discernment. And discernment does not announce itself. It watches. It waits. It sees patterns before outcomes. People sense that you don't just hear words. You read intention. That makes careless speech feel risky around you. So silence becomes protection. They are protecting their image, protecting their mask, protecting their unfinished self. And that is not your burden. Chosen one, prophets in Scripture were often described as unsettling, not because they were cruel, but because truth stood too close. When prophets entered spaces, people paused. Kings hesitated. Crowds quieted. Not because the prophet demanded silence, but because truth does not rush. You carry that same energy, not because you try to, but because you've lived through pressure that refined you. Pain taught you restraint. Isolation taught you clarity. Silence taught you discernment. You didn't come out loud. You came out grounded. This is why you must stop asking, "Why don't they talk to me?" and start understanding. They don't know how. Not everyone has the emotional maturity to engage someone who is internally stable. Stability feels foreign to those who survive by chaos. Chosen one, let me free you from something. You do not need to explain your quiet. You do not need to justify your presence. You do not need to fill silence to make others comfortable. Every time you rush to speak, you override the authority God placed on your stillness. Silence is not absence. Silence is containment, and containment is power that has learned patience. Now hear this part carefully because it protects you. Some people stare because they are assessing whether you are safe to manipulate. And when they cannot quickly decide, they choose observation instead of engagement. This is why some never approach you. Your boundaries are felt before they are spoken. You don't overshare. You don't react emotionally. You don't chase validation. That alone repels people who need access to control. And that is divine protection. Chosen one, not every stare is admiration. Not every silence is respect. Some are uncertainty. Some are fear. Some are recognition mixed with insecurity. And that is okay. You are not responsible for regulating how others process your presence. You are responsible for staying aligned. There is also something deeply important happening here. Your presence activates self-reflection in others. Not intentionally, not consciously, but subconsciously. They begin to ask themselves questions they've been avoiding. Why am I so loud? Why am I always anxious? Why do I feel unsettled right now? And self-reflection is uncomfortable for people who prefer distraction. So they go quiet. Because silence is safer than honesty. Chosen one, this is why you were trained to be comfortable being misunderstood. If you needed approval, this season would break you. If you needed constant engagement, this silence would feel unbearable. But you learned something crucial. You learned that peace does not require explanation. That is maturity. Now listen. As you move forward, this dynamic will change. Right now, people observe. Later, people will ask. And eventually, people will listen. But that progression only happens if you do not abandon yourself in the quiet. Do not perform smallness to ease tension. Do not dilute your awareness to fit in. Do not apologize for your presence. God did not refine you for comfort. He refined you for clarity. Chosen one, let this settle. You are not watched because you are strange. You are watched because you are stable. You are not silent because you are afraid. You are silent because you are aware. And awareness always speaks louder than words. If you are still here, let me say this with certainty. You are entering a season where silence around you will turn into discernment within you. You will know who to engage, who to observe, who to distance from who, to allow closer, not by logic, by peace. And peace never rushes. Hold steady. Do not break your rhythm. Truth does not need to announce itself. It stands. And chosen one, silence follows truth. Chosen one, now we step into a truth that explains something you have felt but could never fully name. There are people who envy you deeply, not loudly, not aggressively, but quietly. And that quiet envy is the reason confrontation never comes, because confrontation requires confidence, and envy exposes insecurity. People confront what they believe they can overpower. They stay silent around what they feel beneath. And many feel beneath you, even if they would never admit it. Not because you are superior, but because you are settled. Chosen one, envy does not always look like hatred. Often, it looks like watching without supporting silence where encouragement should be distance disguised as neutrality, compliments that never come. They are not indifferent. They are conflicted. Your existence forces a comparison they didn't agree to make. Here is the part that matters most. They envy you not for what you have, but for what you refused to become. You did not numb yourself to survive. You did not sell your values for belonging. You did not betray your inner compass for convenience. And that integrity costs something. Most people chose comfort instead. So when they see you standing calmly in who you are, it awakens regret. And regret does not speak loudly. It watches. Chosen one, envy stays quiet when it knows it cannot win a confrontation. They cannot accuse you. You didn't wrong them. They cannot compete with you. You're not playing the same game. They cannot expose you. There is nothing hidden. So they observe. They try to understand how you move without panic, how you remain calm without approval, how you progress without announcing yourself. They want the secret. But the secret is not something you can give. It is something you lived through. This is why their silence feels heavy sometimes. Because they are wrestling internally. Part of them admires you. Part of them resents the mirror you represent. And people do not confront mirrors. They avoid them. Chosen one, this is also why gossip often stops around you. You may have noticed this. People lower their voices, change subjects, pause conversations. Not because you demanded respect, but because your presence raises awareness. They feel that careless speech would expose their insecurity. So silence becomes safer. Now listen carefully, because this is where the shift begins. At first, people watch you to measure themselves against you. Later, they watch you to learn from you. And eventually, they watch you to acknowledge what they cannot deny. That progression is slow, because honor takes time to replace envy. Chosen one, honor is born when consistency outlives comparison. When you keep showing up the same way, calm, grounded, principled, people realize something important. You are not a phase. You are not lucky. You are not pretending. You are rooted. And rooted people cannot be shaken by opinion. This is when the shift happens. The staring changes. It becomes quieter, steadier, more respectful. People begin to listen before they speak. They weigh their words. They stop testing you. because truth has proven durable. Chosen one, this is why God allows you to be watched before being honored. If honor came too early, it would distort you. If validation came before grounding, it would weaken you. So God lets envy burn itself out. He lets observers grow tired of watching, because eventually watching without results becomes exhausting. And when they realize you are not fading, not failing, not folding, respect forms, not admiration. Respect. Respect does not clap loudly. Respect adjusts behavior. You will notice people address you differently. Your opinion is asked, not challenged. Your presence slows rooms instead of stirring tension. This is not ego. This is authority earned quietly. Chosen one, some who envied you will never admit it. Instead, they will change their tone, soften their stance, create distance without hostility. That is okay. Not everyone who watches is meant to walk with you. Some are only meant to witness your consistency. Now let me ground you in this truth. Do not rush the shift. Do not force recognition. Do not announce your growth. Let time do the talking. Time is the one thing envy cannot outpace. Chosen one, honor arrives when people realize your presence does not need permission, that you are not trying to be seen, that you are not trying to be chosen. You already are. And here is the final piece that brings peace. When envy turns into honor, it does not always become closeness. Sometimes it becomes distance. Sometimes it becomes silence with respect. Sometimes it becomes quiet support from afar. All of those are acceptable outcomes. Because your assignment was never to be liked. It was to be aligned. Chosen one, you are no longer in the season of proving. You are in the season of being observed until truth is undeniable. And truth does not rush. It stands. Like this message, agreement strengthens alignment. Subscribe. The next part explains who is allowed to approach you now. Comment. 888. If you are ready to let honor arrive without forcing it, remain steady. The watching is almost over. Honor follows endurance.